From Trichomes Studios, I'm Jesse Betend, and this is The High Ground. On this show, we talk to the leaders of the cannabis industry, farmers, CEOs, public officials, anyone making an impact on the cannabis community and beyond. Blockchain and cannabis are two things that you tend not to find in the same sentence. And when you do, as my guest today points out, people's minds often jump to Silk Road and other illicit activities. But one thing that the two have in common is they're both key to the future of medicine. And my guest today knows all about that. Amy Berliner is CEO of Aegis Biotech. Aegis is a pioneer in both blockchain technology and medical cannabis. They also provide consulting to everyone from small companies all the way up to governments and congressional campaigns. Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I am here in Chicago, currently in my bedroom. Where are you? What's your quarantine situation like?
I'm in Southern California in my office at home. So for me, it's still functioning and I'm still able to do what I need to do. As long as I have the internet, my brain, and my laptop, I'm good.
How has the spread of COVID impacted life at Aegis on a daily basis?
I think it's actually been a benefit to a large degree because we do a lot of consulting. And so we work with a lot of different people in a lot of vertical spaces, whether it be from startup to existing businesses or governments. And so what we can do quite remotely from where we are because of the expertise and team that we have. We work with a group of scientists, fairly large group of developers in the blockchain. We work with a lot of different people in academia. And so for us, it's about that communication. It's about writing and creating abstracts and white papers and things that are going to be really fundamental to how we change the future of, for us, what we see as integrative healthcare. And that's really important to us, is that we want to be able to fuse the future with both science and technology. And how we do that is by working vertically in these conduits with a lot of different people in different spaces, whether it be from alternative to traditional healthcare or business, really helping them navigate through some, adapting waters. Right now the landscape is very different. People are wondering what this will mean for the future of the economy, for the future of healthcare, for the future of freedom. But for us at a high level, I think it's only increased our opportunities to work with a lot of different companies. We're working with the country of Belize. We're working with Canada and Mexico, Israel. So there's a lot of different, and then the US. So there's a lot of different ways that we're working to help different businesses and companies and even governments look at what will be the future of healthcare.
Before we get further into the work that you guys are doing and how you guys are kind of rising to meet this moment, you've said yourself that your story is really core to the work that you do. So I want to kind of take a step back and work through that and kind of give the audience a chance to get to know you.
Sure.
What was your life before Aegis like, and how did you kind of come to build the company?
So my life before Aegis was a stressful one. Stressful in the sense that I was always, I worked 12-hour days a lot of times. I traveled a lot. I loved the sun. I love being tan in California. Probably one of the other people might look at that and go, oh, just, so jealous of our sunshine. But I loved the fact that we had sun. And I love sugar. I was born and raised a vegetarian. So my whole life, I've had a high metabolism. I've always been fit, prided myself on that. But I love sugar because I thought I could justify that. And then I had a boss who, chain smoked around me a lot. And so I was just like this perfect petri dish of infection waiting to really happen. And in 2012, In 2012, I ended up, it was kind of at a height of a time when the economy was taking some shifts in certain verticals in the industry. And I was a senior executive of a manufacturing company, and ended up being laid off. And 7 months later, found out that I had skin cancer. And it was a gut punch because, I'd never really had to look for a job before. I had my recruiter working great for me, but I just didn't find anything that I was going to resonate with. And so I ended up deciding that I was going to go back to school. I was going to focus on my health. I was going to focus on me, which is something that's really hard for me to do. Most people that know me, I always like to take care of others first. But I've had to learn some things along the way. And one of them is we're only as good to others as we are to ourselves. And it took me having to go through this experience. I say out of my frustration comes innovation. And it took me going through getting cancer. And I almost feel like it was on purpose and a blessing and somewhat disguised, because I think it's led me to my purpose and the reason for why I'm so passionate about what I do. It's so purposefully driven to not only help myself, but to help others. And so I went back to school. I got 6 months away from an ND, and then I decided I would go through some additional alternative studies. I wanted to just really get the base core of my health really solid. And then I had this guy who was this millennial, and he was like, "Hey, Amy," he had heard that I gotten skin cancer, and he was like, this is probably a really good opportunity to share something with you. And so he began kind of evangelizing, if you will, to me this whole, CBD, so great. And, then he said cannabis, and then he said weed, and then he said marijuana. And I was like, oh my gosh, you need to stop. Like, I don't know what you're throwing at me. Like, are these different brands? Like, I was so disconnected. I'd never smoked a cigarette in my life. I'd never done a drug in my life that wasn't prescribed and short-lived. And I decided, oh my gosh, I've got to school this guy, So I went back into research. I was like, I'm so going to show him that he's wrong. This is so crazy. Why do you have to call something so many things all at one time? It's so confusing. And so I went home and I went on this dive of research, and I work things backwards, mind map in my head. And so I immediately went to the US patent and found a federal patent on cannabinoids. And I was like, oh my God, I owe this kid such an apology. And I did. I called him up and I said, I am humbled and I owe you an apology. And I think it's really important along the way that when we've come from such a staunch position of something and we learn something along the way that can help other people, I think it's really important that we acknowledge our own weaknesses and sometimes our own arrogance to things that we think we know. And so I think it's really important that we have to, at every generation has something to offer. And I think that there's always insight to that. So I immediately went through the Medical and Clinical Cannabis Institute for continuing education for clinicians. Then I followed that with the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine. And I said, if I know that I feel this way about that whole culture is what I saw, then I had to be able to help people bridge it to the safer science, which is what I needed to see. So I had to be able to speak to somebody like myself with something supportive, something evidentiary, something that had some traction to it in some studies where I could find some validity to what they were saying, the content. And so I did. I went through that. I began working with a chemist to create a formulation for myself. It looked like I had a brain tumor literally growing on my arm. It started from nothing, and then it evolved into a very large tumor. Looked like a brain literally growing on the side of my arm. It was horrific.
Wow.
So scary. And but I wanted to become my own case study. And so I began journaling and tracking my use of cannabinoids and just trying to deal with some of the indications. And I said, well, first, if I can, boost my immune system, which of course now we know CBD is a great immune booster, but it also oxygenates the blood. So I was like, these are things that I really need to have in my system. In addition to my supplements, I felt it was going to be really complementary. And so I began doing that. It took me 8 months, scary as hell, because I really told no one. because nobody would have believed if you told them that. That would have been like them hearing I was no longer a vegetarian, and they would have been like, "That's not true. That's not her." And so I knew that I had to get to a place where I was seeing some real indications being met. And I had previously had a spinal cord injury, horseback riding. I had broken C5 and C6. And so I had suffered major neuropathy because I didn't do the fusion in my neck. So I suffered from a lot of neuropathy on the left side of my body, and a lot of back muscle spasm pain. And so I tried, the doctors have given me opiates and different things like that, and none of them worked. And I was unable to fall asleep and stay asleep. I didn't even know what REM 4-5 sleep ever was. I don't think I had ever had that experience until I started using CBD and different variables of that. And
Wow.
so I got excited when I got to see what was really happening for me. But I think what's really important, what happened for me, is sometimes relative to everyone's physiology, right? We're all different. Different tumors are different. Different cells are different. So we have to react in more of a precisional type of way, right? We have to approach it with a strategy. And so there was a real strategy behind, what we felt was good in the formulary for me, that could benefit my health, but could also potentially affect some of these other indications that I had, of which it did. So through the course of that, really, I was, without me knowing it, it was really becoming the impetus and the segue for how I was going to transition to owning my own company and finding a different purpose for my journey. And so I then realized, once I'd kind of gotten on the other side of it, started doing a lot of public speaking, speaking at UCLA, UCI, USC, really working with a lot of high-level academic people who were very interested in the science, but also some of the technology, micro and nanotechnologies and things like that fused in formularies, and how that could benefit, the consumer. But also then I decided I was going to create a publication. I said, well, if there's no publication out there that really needs to communicate this to an ecosystem that I'm familiar with that only responds to, PubMed and clinical studies and those types of things, I knew I needed to draft something that was going to be a bridge to people who were much like me, very standoffish, very corporately critical. And yet, as a researcher, the most important thing was to be able to look at, I always say research is only research when we continue to pursue the things that we don't know and either validate what we learn from that or walk away from it because it shows no intrinsic value. That's research, when we're always pushing that envelope. And I knew that, we have to start looking at new things. There's evolution in science. There's evolution and mutations that happen in diseases and conditions. And until we meet the core conditional problem, everything we kind of deal with in, especially American healthcare, has largely been more anecdotal. Treat the symptom, not the disease or the condition particularly. And so I knew, for me personally, I needed to start it there, and I knew I needed to communicate that. So created a publication called Canna Healthcare Magazine. And in 5 publications, we were able to get over a little over 100 and something thousand subscribers globally, which was quite validating when it was organic. I didn't go out there and, spend thousands of dollars looking for people to join and subscribe to a free publication. I was just saying, hey, if you're looking for information that's evidentiary and science-based, here you go. And it was written by MDs and PhDs that I knew. And there was safe science in that. So created that publication and really highlighted, the science and the technology, but also sharing patient stories, which I feel are so important to helping people kind of relate and find something that they can gravitate to and say, even though I'm not like this person in that way, maybe there's something beneficial out of what I can learn from their story. And I think that's with all of our stories, to be honest with you. And so it kind of became that impetus, is going through my own healthcare struggle. And, at the time I was doing a lot of consulting in healthcare, and, I was like, I should be doing this for myself. I should be helping other people. I see that there's a lot of missed opportunities in technology, and I know how to get it out there, and I know how to get it in a place where people respond to it. And so it was that experience that kind of pushed me, and me seeing that, I've always had a platform to speak from. I've always had a lot of vertical relationships that have been high level, which have afforded me some great, great conversations and great people to work with. And so I think that I always say if you go through something, there's always a purpose for the pain. And the purpose for my pain, I didn't quite know it at the time, was really so I could build Aegis, which, by the way, in Greek means shield. And so our ultimate goal is to umbrella people's health from care to cure. And, what we do today is going to be so important to the future of healthcare tomorrow. And we want to be a part of that healthcare journey. We want to help companies be able to have safer science. So we're working with, natural, nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, to really bridge that and saying, listen, there's a way that we can all play in this world together. And I think that we have to resonate to a market of people who are frustrated. You look at the millennials today, and I work with a lot of them. I've mentored a lot of them, which has been amazing. Great energy, seeking to find something that they can put their passion into and find a purpose for their journey. And the one thing that I've learned from many of them have been over and over again, in fact, even studies have shown this, that millennial minds are choosing to walk away from healthcare because they're seeing it ineffective. And to some degree, they're absolutely right. We have the highest cost of healthcare in the world, and yet sometimes the least effective. And so we see medical vacations, people taking their data, their dollars, their hope, and their stories to other countries that are being more progressive towards research. And so I said, I don't want to see people have to spend their money, take time away from work when there's something we could do here locally to help people and connect them to real safe science and studies that will benefit them today, instead of having to wait years down the road, or having different people orchestrate, something for them to be able to find the treatments that they're looking for. And so, it's one of those things that I look back and I'm like, I so understand why I had to go through what I did. And it's been a humbling experience, but at the same time, I'm so thankful, because out of being able to help myself, I'll be able to help others going forward.
On Aegis's website, there's a reference to the fact that working in healthcare means working in many different areas.
Right.
And I think that that's very evident through, your story and what you've said already. When it comes, you've already got a hand in generating this data and collecting studies, working in cannabis and sort of pushing medical research and data. Where does blockchain fit into that equation, and how do you kind of marry those two interests?
Great question. Well, first, when you work in science and technology, both are always progressive, right? You have to view that optic from a progressive measure. And I think the legacy challenges have always been is government, healthcare, so many of banking, so many of these industries have been kind of legacy, right? Some people call them dinosaur, like those systems are outdated. We need to look at something more progressive, integrative, much more transparent, and immutable, right? Key challenges today is healthcare data is 10 times worth more dollar value on the underground market than it is your banking data. And so when we look at that kind of data and we say, wow, this is so important, the reason it's important is because every day there's formulas being created based on data. And if that's obscured data, if that's compromised data, if that's sabotage data, then it alters the outcomes of what we choose to do, whether it be in the research lab, whether it be in people looking at voting applications or whatever. But people's cybersecurity, you look at, and I won't name the names because it's well out there, but there's a lot of healthcare companies that have been, because they're on silo servers, they've been hacked numerous times. And in those silo servers, you'll find thousands upon thousands of user data information, right? A lot of proprietary data, HIPAA compliant, of course, but it doesn't negate the fact that there are people who infiltrate those silo servers to get an acquisition of a bulk of user data. The blockchain is really exciting because it's a different application and platform altogether. Think of what the internet really was meant to be when it first came out. That's really what blockchain is. Think of it like a freeway, right? It's the way that you get to the market, right? And that's what the internet was. Well, blockchain came to fruition because they said, wow, too many people are really trying to, the bureaucracy of it all, the different agencies wanting to be a part of it, yet here was blockchain being made, created, and used. And let me preface this, when you marry cannabis with blockchain, people instantly, let's say, think Silk Road, right? And Silk Road being something that's underground, something that isn't beneficial to a mainstream market. Much like with the internet, there's a deep dark web, and that's known. Everyone knows that. Doesn't mean you access that part of the portal or that application part of it. And the same boat's true with blockchain, is that the beauty about blockchain is it's immutable. So if you were trying to hack into someone's information, first of all, it would take you years, first of all, to accomplish that, unless you had today the Google or IBM quantum computer, of which you could accomplish that. However, blockchain, what it does is it marries a chain of data to a verified amount of data that links to each part of, whether it be a transaction, whether it be a node of information, whether it be a payment, whether it be a document. Any of those things are married to a part of the chain that become unhinged. There is no way to compromise that unless it's incorrect data, of which it wouldn't be connected to the chain anyway. And so what blockchain does is it says, hey, we believe in open source, right? Blockchain, which is kind of like the internet, you believe in open source, people having access to information and having access to certain data. Look at global healthcare. Perfect example. Today, if I were to jump on a plane and go to Turkey, I would have a challenge with saying, well, I'm with this healthcare agency. Can you just look up my data? Well, no. They'd have to call, they'd have to acquire a digital document, or have it faxed over. This is the legacy side of where we are. What blockchain effectively does is automates your information, shares it with who you choose to share that with permissions. And there's not some third party, let's say Facebook or any third party intermediary who's saying, I don't like you doing that. We're not communists here. We're allowing people to access data that is their data, whether it be their data or open source data. We want them to have that information. And so what blockchain has created is environments that are open source and private source. So private source being it's protected in a different way, right? Like I don't want to share this with the world, or I don't want to share this with certain communities. Whereas, you go on the internet, you can put something out there and it's there for life. Things are more adaptable and more progressive with blockchain because it's an environment, like I said, that's immutable. It's a way for people to have a seamless control of their own data, who they share it with, what they choose to put into the data. And these types of applications are really what are going to be the future of the technology anyway. We're going to digital currency. There's no way in the world, when we continue to see the value of the dollar declining, that we wouldn't think, when we see Bitcoin, and as much as it's all up and down on the exchange of that platform, it's much like the dollar. It's already has a value that's been established by a community. It's been validated in that regard. So it's not this hypothesis pitch deck that's been thrown to a wall and says, hey, we think this might work. It's actually, it's live. It's working today. In fact, governments are using it. They're taking it to whether to pay property tax, or they're paying transactions at DMV, or they're paying for how they vote, where they ensure that their voting choice is actually registered, where they can see it. They know it hasn't been altered. Whereas, if you get something in the mail, we didn't get your ballot, it got lost. Oops. There's no way to verify that. Who do you call when you go, I don't think my vote got counted? There isn't that, So really having these opportunities to create more transparency, but also accountability to the people who own those platforms, and really saying, listen, you're responsible. You're sharing that data. You're monetizing people's data to third party. Blockchain's changing that, because blockchain's putting that decision now in the user's hand. And so there's resistance to blockchain, and there will be, but I will tell you, it is the future. Quantum computing is on its heels. So our platform will be quantum computing resistant. And we're putting parameters in for the future to be able to adapt to when the supercomputer, takes a more dominant role in technology. But we have to help people pace what is going to be really the future of science and tech, and how we're going to interoperate with users and data, currency, transactions, any of those things. It's going to effectively connect the world in a much more effective and efficient way than we see today, based on SaaS models and silo system servers and all the infiltrations that we see today in technology.
How does cannabis's legal status on a federal level, impact innovation within the medical and technology sectors?
Well, put it this way, I'm in California. And California, for a very long time, had a proposition called 215, which was a fabulous compassionate care act for people who suffered from AIDS and HIV and different indications that really there was really no progressive treatment at the time to really help. And so there's a lot of side effects. And so here in California, we saw a huge movement of people really promotive to 215. A few years back, we saw Prop 65 come in, and that was really to say, hey, California, we realize most people want to endorse cannabis. We're going to let that happen. So we're going to give people access, and you don't have to get a medical cannabis card anymore. You can just be a recreational user. And I think that what I saw happening even before that, I saw it happening, which was pharmaceutical would love to have cannabis in their arsenal. And we've seen that, we've seen that go in through GW Pharmaceutical, and, the huge strides that they've made to look at, phytosynthetic type of formulations and then synthetic formulations. And so certainly, our participation at a federal level has been working with, different institutions that have been studying various compounds with cannabis, as well as here in the United States that we have, universities. University of Mississippi has been federally funded for cannabis study. So actually have a grow farm today. They have a lab. So it's a bit of a challenge for people who now are seeing 33 states and 9 countries in the US kind of going, we're going to think about it. Well, meanwhile, people are suffering. And so what are they using? They're using, whether it's called alternative or medical cannabis, they're going to anecdotally try to treat something if traditional healthcare has failed them, if opiates have failed, or things like that. People are going to start to look over the fence and say, what other things are available? Oh yeah, I heard about CBD. Let me check that out. And so I think what's going to happen is we're going to see, more and more people. I work with a lot of people in terpene formulations and, CBD hemp formulations and CBD seed genomic formulas and genetics. And what I see happening is people need to first understand grassroots. What is the evolution of this plant to better understand in a way that, there's hemp and then there's cannabis, grown for different purposes. Hemp is for industrial. Yes, there are some side attributes of it and characteristics of it that are highly beneficial to health and wellness. And then you have cannabis, which was bred for more of its medicinal properties. And so on a higher level, you can take less and have effectively a microdose and have more output than you could with hemp. But I think right now in a market that we have today, I think what's going to be most important is for people who are looking at this industry and saying, I don't know, which products do you trust? Which companies and science do you trust? And at the end of the day, it's like with anything else. If you're going to the store, you're going to have to do some of your homework and figure out, if some of the products and ingredients are beneficial to your particular indication or problem. But, healthcare wants to be involved, but healthcare has really taken a back seat to even the conversation. And this is the frustration that so many clinicians have had, is because, they're saying, hey, we want to be able to talk to our patients, but we really can't because, we're a federally funded institution and, it's not federally legalized. And yet, I can tell you every week I get calls by MDs and PhDs saying, Amy, how do we join and help work with you? And, we're thinking about leaving healthcare, or we're thinking about, going back to school. And these are the things that, are challenging, because if we train doctors in healthcare, physiology, we train them pharmacology, we train them on biophysiology and biology, then one would have to believe that we train as well to some of those things that are potential iterations or integrations into someone's health. You look at San Francisco. San Francisco's legalized psilocybin, right? Mushrooms. And, the rest of the state kind of not there yet. But we see people saying, hey, there's something valuable to that. And so again, when we say we're going to allow it, but we're not going to allow it, we send a mixed message. And the challenge becomes is, again, who do you trust when a lot of people don't trust either side of healthcare, whether it's alternative, people might think that's voodoo, shamanic, snake oil, to a traditional outcome of things, and people might say that's not effective either. And I've exhausted the traditional healthcare treatment system and nothing's worked for me, and now I got to figure it out on my own. There's a lot of people in that category. And so I think as long as there's an arrogant posture from any vertical entry point, then it's only going to continue to push and promote the disconnect that's going to continue to divide people with, whether it be alternative or traditional healthcare. And they're going to figure it out on their own. And this is certainly a millennial mindset for sure, as well as a geriatric mindset, coming from a history of people who have said, hey, my grandmother tried this. Again, this is where healthcare has to recognize that people are starting to go back to some of the grassroots things of what they know. If we see that, in California, the number one thing that we have in this state is lung and bronchial cancers. That's the top diagnosis of cancer every year, with, overall 176,000 new cancer diagnoses per year. And yet there's something about our state that says, hey, we're progressive and we promote plant health and we promote, science savvy Silicon Valley. And yet, do we? We look at our pollution, we look at innovation, and we say, well, what have we really delivered? Where are we the solution? And I think that that's where a lot of my conversations are with different people at a congressional level and even at state levels and government levels, is saying, listen, you guys, the further you push back on this and the more that you're going to look at this and say, well, we're going to talk about this in a few years, when people are on the other side of being well, how do you think you're going to get them back into your clinic? How do you think you're going to get them back on your prescription if they figured it out without you? And so I think that there's a way to do that, and we're fusing the way to integratively have healthcare benefit both alternative and traditional healthcare, to where they'll see the value of that merging data in a way that's meaningful, and in a way that this peace flag of health can be waved, instead of this partisan ideology of that it's a left or right conversation, and it's not. Healthcare is not a left or right conversation. People on the left or the right side get cancer every day. People on the left and right side are getting COVID every day. So it doesn't discriminate against a party. It discriminates against a cellular makeup and physiology in our body. And so I think it's really important that we diplomatically, and that's always been my approach, is bridging really people with the idea of diplomacy and saying, listen, unless we fuse this, we're going to lose tractionability of all things that are going to be meaningful. And like I said, if you don't have that data, if people don't trust your platform to hold their data, they don't trust your science, then they become the researcher themselves. And so, I think that healthcare is more in line than most people believe in mainstream, largely because they are recognizing this and they are seeing their numbers drop. It's just like in beer today, people are seeing less people drinking beer and they're drinking more seltzers and more things that have more functional beverages and food functions, because we're missing things in the daily diet that would normally supplement. So when we're able to, effectively change the way people look at the foundation of health, leveraging technology, leveraging science, leveraging our research, then we effectively change things for everyone in a way that benefits everyone, instead of, well, it's just, really this group who benefits and really this group who benefits. I think we're at a place in our world that we have to find ways to unify benefit and unify a global message that says, listen, we want that interoperability with permissions, but really allowing the user to have that control and allowing the constituent and the patient and the consumer to make better choices because they have options, not because we say that, we're X brand and that we're going to force it down your throat that this is this is your only choice. And I think today we live in an ecosystem where choices are the expectation when it comes to people in healthcare, when it comes to people in government. And I think it's just really important that we be able to ride alongside that and pace that so we can contribute and leave a legacy behind. That is one that we were effective and efficient at really staying progressive and really pacing global markets where they are.
In your journey to sort of build the future of medicine today,
Mm-hmm.
shall we say, what is next coming out of this current moment for Aegis, for you? What are you guys hoping to kind of do next in the future couple of years?
So the first iteration is our technology that will be coming out. So Stream by Aegis Biotechnologies, which is our tech division, will be releasing our mHealth preclinical data repository, proprietary platform on the blockchain. And we will be releasing that this summer, which is really exciting. So if you have beta users that want to get the first experience of that before we go live, they can hop onto my website and go to Stream. And down at the bottom, they can register so they can be one of the first users and really kind of help us, again, make sure that we get it right. And so I would encourage people to do that. Follow that up by releasing some of our own functional products. And that's going to be really exciting for us, is really, we see health as a lifestyle. We see it from cradle to grave, right? There isn't a time in our life that we shouldn't be supplementing. So we'll be releasing a supplement line fourth quarter of this year. And very excited about that because it will be what supplement stacking is, but in ways that people can take less but have more. Things that are bioactive and bioavailable, which is really important. There's a lot of iterations of that today in the world, and we're really dealing with a lot of quantum physics when it comes to bioavailability. We're dealing with a lot of different functional aspects that are going to help people who, again, look at healthcare and say, well, the reason I don't choose, maybe more alternative choices is it takes too long. Whereas if I take something else, I get that effect right away. And I always say, you don't get sick overnight and you don't get well overnight. And if we can create products that can really help stabilize the homeostasis, whether it be mind, body, or soul, I think that is really our goal. And then again, with each one of our products, a portion of those proceeds will go back into our foundation for private research into those things I shared with you earlier for pediatrics and others. So, I think those are the two big things. We've been doing consulting up until now and really helping people, vertically get to where they need to get. But at the same time, working with a lot of people strategically, really in the trench with a lot of different groups, so we can help them and they will be able to effectively help us. And so we can all benefit, from the fruits of all of our labor. And that's really what blockchain is about. That's really what medical cannabis is about. When you look at the research that's out there, I mean, Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, 3 decades ago was ahead of our research today. And I admire him. He is an incredible researcher and innovator. And so we want to continue those types of legacies that people have pioneered, and really giving people the opportunity to have functional things that are therapeutic, that are beneficial to the foundation of wellness and of health, but also giving people a technology that in real time can affect real-time pain problems, and with turnkey solutions for them in real time as well.
Amy Berliner, CEO of Aegis. Amy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking with you, and I appreciate you having me on your show.
You can find more cannabis industry reporting at trichomes.com, as well as more great shows like this one. If you're a member of the cannabis community and you have a story you want to share with us, reach out. You can reach the show at highground@trichomes.com. Please take a second to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. It really helps others find the show. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at trichomes.com and following us on all social media. The High Ground is produced by David Fortin. I'm Jesse Betend, and thank you for listening.